farmers got riled up about it. I don't know that there's a whole lot they can do, but and it's not quite at that stage, but it's starting to raise some eyebrows, put it that way.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Comstock channel. I'm Marlin Bohling with you. I am pleased to welcome aboard Matthew Kruse, the president of Comstock Investments. And here we are on a Tuesday. We're going to take a look at what's driving the ag world here as we get into the second day of the week. Matthew, lots to talk about. The markets don't seem overly enthused on the grain side here. Cattle market had quite a few days here recently, but one thing that we're all kind of focused on right now is the start of our growing season, and I guess that would start with, of course, the planting progress here. And you have some new data to take a look at here as far as what has come out. Let's take a look first here at our corn planting progress and see just what's going on.
Yeah, the market's clearly focused on weather, and it's at the moment we're well in line with historical planting progress. USDA put us at 40% here, I think, as of last Friday, and we look out into the forecast, and we'll kind of share the screen here in a little bit, but we don't see much precipitation for the greater part of the central corn belt here, basically in the next 2 weeks almost, or 10 days, 2 weeks. And so what that basically says is we're going to see a major advancement in planting progress this week, and to the point where pretty much I would expect everyone to get done ideally by the end of next week in the whole corn belt. And so and then after that, looking out ahead, we do see starting around the 18th of May, we see some precipitation coming in. But basically what that says is looks like we're gonna get the crop in on time, and maybe even a little bit ahead of schedule. And so that that's what's weighing on the markets. That's why we had a terrible day yesterday, and we're not doing a whole lot better today.
Yeah, it seems like it just deflated all the weather premium right out of that corn market here. So corn planting, now what we're looking at here is the 5-year average progress on the line. And this is taking us all the way through mid-June here on this average, right?
Yeah, once we get to 90%, it kind of slows down. But, what's probably most important is that you're getting, by the second week of May, you have a little over half of the crop in. And, I think we'll exceed that 56% average. In my opinion, we'll exceed that by next week. Might even be closer to 60%. And but the point is, we'll have the bulk of this crop in, by the end of the month for sure. It looks like.
Did you get all done on your farm this week?
Well, I got done. What was it? 23rd of April. So yeah, I've been done for a little while already. It's starting to come up. So.
Good.
We got started pretty early, and I talked about before how we've experienced some of the flooding last year, and
right.
And if there's a huge difference in yield between what got planted early and what got planted late. So I think everyone's looking to get planted even earlier, as soon as we can, basically, as long as the temperatures allow.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe you had a few acres left to go yet.
I have some family that I talked to, was probably Friday, and they had 4 or 5 days left. So that was on Friday. So they're going to be done, here later this week for sure. And I think that's going to be the case for a lot of people. They're going to get done this week, and for the most part in Iowa.
Well, on planting progress on beans. So here we are looking at the green bar on May 4th. Looks like we're running ahead of schedule a little bit here.
Again, run ahead of schedule. And, I think more and more people seem to see the benefit in planting beans before corn, or at least in tandem with corn. I know some people in our area, they got one planter for corn, one for beans, and they run them at the same time. And, it used to be you always did corn first and then beans later. And now I think people are more and more open to the idea of trying to do beans a little bit earlier too. So I've seen them work out well. I mean, I've planted soybeans by April 23rd before and got 70 bushels, and I think they perform just fine. It's just your biggest risk is the frost, if you get some surprise frost, but just the opposite, temperature outlook is above average, and so I don't see any risk there. And I think Eric Snodgrass has talked in the past by you kind of got to get out past May 13th before the risk of frost pretty much drops to zero, and so we'll be there pretty soon.
As far as maybe the U.S. weather and how the planting season looks as we now transition into the full growing season.
This is one weather service that I use, and just kind of short-term forecast in the Central Corn Belt. You kind of see here taking us out now through next Monday, May 12th. You can kind of see the greater part of this Corn Belt from Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, pretty much everything. You don't see hardly anything happening now in the south and the southern plains, especially down in the Delta region here. I mean, they're getting some pretty heavy rainfall. Looks like that Louisiana getting up to 4 or 5 inches. I don't know how much that's going to help the Mississippi River level, since it's kind of happening towards the end of the river. But this southern plains we talked about last week has been pretty wet, and it looks like they're going to get several more inches here. But kind of looking out further ahead into the second week of May, is some of the same things. Like we're still through next week, it's pretty dry. And then let's see here, as we kind of get into the 18th, here's May 18th, start to see some pockets forming. 19th,
you're still in kind of a donut hole there, aren't you?
Yeah, there's still a big donut hole. Yeah. So now you're through May 19th. Our farm is right here. For May, we haven't gotten the drop yet, according to this chart. Southern Iowa is starting to get some rain. Here we are. So now we're through May 21st, and we haven't gotten anything. So I don't know that for the moment the market's looking at that as, we're gonna get some field work done. We're gonna get the planning done. But some point you got some water to help this crop germinate, and this is, I don't know. I'm at 3 weeks. To me, you're at the point where it starts to go the other way, where the crop is. It doesn't need a lot of moisture, but it's got to have some moisture to kind of get going. Especially in some of those drier areas. So South Dakota, I mean they haven't had too much rain up until now. They're pretty dry, and they're going to need some more rain to get the crop going. So, but I don't know. Illinois, Indiana, the whole Eastern Corn Belt, they're looking pretty good overall, right? They're getting an inch, in that May 20th area. But I don't know. It's kind of a little bit concerning, but looking out here at this is kind of weather anomaly, 15 days here out through May 21st. You kind of see where that dry pocket is. It's a big part of Iowa and southern Minnesota and the South Dakota, Nebraska. So, I mean, it's not a small area, but, at one point, do we switch that mentality from, look how quickly we're planning to, oh man, we need a rain or this crop isn't going to come up evenly. That's kind of my concern here. So, but we've seen in the past where, Chicago's in Illinois, and if Illinois gets rain, well, then they seem to think that the whole Corn Belt gets rain, and so they're getting a little bit more rain in that eastern area.
Interesting stuff. So it's ironic that it's almost the polar opposite of what we had last year. Last year you were inundated with water, and now you're about as some of the driest part of the country now this spring. So maybe it all does average out over time. I did want to throw up this South American weather map here that you have. And this is, looking out to Monday. But as they continue to progress with their safrinha corn crop, mainly that's what's left, I guess, right? Except for Argentina there. This looks pretty beneficial overall for the crop, doesn't it?
Well, no, in that white area, I mean, it's void of all precipitation there. That's what it's showing through at least May 12th in Mato Grosso, the white and gray area. I mean, they aren't getting any precipitation there, and that's the primary growing region. Now, down further south in Rio Grande do Sul, and then over into Argentina, they're getting a lot of rain. They're going to get, those areas, but they're already kind of on the tail end of their soybean harvest in Rio Grande do Sul, and probably 40% done with harvest in Argentina. And so it's probably too late to matter much at this point. Maybe there's some later planted crops that might benefit, but all of that safrinha corn is further north and kind of falls into those pockets there. Where Mato Grosso is a little bit further west.
There, this is where your family's farm is, isn't it? In this region,
A little bit further southeast from there. Yeah.
around
Yep.
there.
Right about there.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So how far along is the corn right there?
It's all in the tasseling stage now, and filling the ears right now, as I think the bulk of the safrinha corn is. You'll find corn in various stages. I mean, I've even heard reports that there's some of the early stuff is starting to harvest, but the bulk of the harvest won't begin until next month in kind of early June, and kind of get wrapped up in mid to late July. So, I mean, there's stuff that was planted in early January, stuff planted in early March, and so kind of a 2-month planting window.
So the majority is more like where I'm circling here right now. Is that where most of your safrinha corn is, right in there? Of course, we're dealing with the tariff trade war going on, and everybody's talking about export potential. Here is something that we can take a look at here. This is related to your safrinha corn crop in Brazil here. What do you have for data here?
Well, this is just CONAB's crop estimates and my crop estimates for the safrinha corn crop in Brazil. And they're kind of coming to the looks to me like the dry season has started in those growing regions in Brazil, and the rainy season has come to an end. We don't see pretty much any precipitation here for the first half of May in some of those more important safrinha growing regions. And but however, we've gotten to the point where the bulk of the crop is kind of made, where what little soil moisture reserves they have left will be able to fill those ears and get it to the finish line. And so, for the most part, I mean, there's always problem areas, but Mato Grosso is the juggernaut, and so I think they're gonna make up for any problem areas that there have been. And so we've been slowly inching our crop estimates for Brazil's corn crop higher, and you can see CONAB's April estimates there at 97.8. They're going to have, let me see, I think pretty soon here, a couple days, they're going to have their May estimates come out, and I think you'll see them inch higher again. But we're close to that 100 million metric tons. And so you add the first crop and the third crop in Brazil, and I think it gets us pretty close to what the USDA had of that 126 million metric tons overall. But I kind of broke it down here by state so you can kind of see a little bit of the difference. We see Mato Grosso increasing. We see some modest decreases in the state of Paraná, for example, and some other surrounding states.
Now, we get our next WASDE report on next Monday. It'll be on May the 12th. In that one, I believe we get our first official estimate from USDA for everything, right? Their first guess at production for the U.S. as well as global production.
Yep, for the 25-26 growing season.
So it has a tendency to be a fairly major report as far as the impact on the market, right?
Well, yeah, we'll get their idea of what the new crop ending stocks look like, and we've covered in the past how we see those increasing and probably going back above 2 billion bushels again, and that's they're forecasting a record corn crop for next season, and obviously it's still early, a lot can happen, but with the increased acres at 95.3 million, and arguably could see them increase higher yet to 96 million. Even with keeping the national yield equal to last year, it's still a pretty large crop.
We also have a few other things to discuss here. When it comes to our talk here about South America, I know you have some graphics you have put together here related to the exports. Now, this would be historic exports when it comes to corn coming out of Brazil. Explain what we're looking at here. We're kind of in the middle of the range here of recent years. How come?
Historically, what we've seen is the more Brazil produces, the more they export. It started to change the last couple of years, and a lot of that's because of the increase in domestic consumption from corn ethanol plants. And so you kind of see they're looking for a little bit of a rebound here in 2025 at 44 million metric tons, up from last year's at 38. But we're still down from a couple years ago, right, where their record exports were at 54.6, and that's when they actually surpassed the United States for almost the first time ever, taking the number one spot for corn exporter away from the United States. But since then, they've settled back down, and I'm kind of looking to the future and seeing that with all the growth that they're talking about with corn ethanol plants coming online. I think they can gobble up on a lot of the future growth. And so I kind of look for the corn exports to maybe plateau more or less in coming years, which should be a good thing for corn producers here in the United States, because this is their second crop and is what we're competing with primarily. That's what mostly goes for exports. And so I guess that's just to give people an idea what the Brazil's corn exports have done.
Why was 2023 such a big year for them?
Well, they had a great crop primarily, and I think some of the newer corn ethanol plants hadn't quite come online yet. And they were very competitive too. Their corn prices were competitive compared to ours, and so you saw a lot of countries, especially China, come and bid up a lot of that corn.
That is bringing something else to mind here. The exchange rate here between the U.S. dollar and the Brazilian real, that tends to change here quite a bit. Where do we now stand from your perspective?
This is important to me. A lot of people ask me sometimes, what is the thing that's going to stop Brazil's growth? And, I don't know that you can completely stop it, but obviously low commodity prices would do that, but that would hurt us too. The one thing that I think would really have a big impact on slowing their growth that wouldn't hurt us as much is if their currency were to strengthen. And that's started to happen here, where the last several years their currency is weakened tremendously. I think last December their Brazilian real was like 6.2 to the dollar. And right now here recently, May 5th, it was 5.68. So that's about a 12% strengthening or increase in their real to the U.S. dollar. But what that means is when it strengthens like that, the soybeans are dollarized. It's still a global dollarized commodity, and so they're getting less in their domestic currency. All things considered equal, if the dollarized soybean price stays the same and their currency strengthens, well, they're getting less. And so basically what this says is they're getting 12% less in their domestic currency compared to just 5 months ago. And so that's something that we're looking at. If this continues to strengthen, I think their farm gate prices are going to suffer, and it's going to put a lot more margin depression on their profitability, and kind of disincentivize growers from expanding there. And so that's just something that we look at from time to time. And because in the past we've talked about how the opposite have happened. They've kind of had the wind at their back as their currency has devalued, and that's added some padding to their prices, their domestic currency. And now, at least in the last 5 months, it's the opposite have happened. And so we'll kind of see what happens going forward.
The red lines on that graphic there, do they just indicate trend lines, or what do they depict here?
Yeah, kind of the support levels. And you kind of see that it's broken through that first support level there, and then kind of set up another support level at that 541. It looks like, and so it's at that 568. Looks like the next support level lowers at 541. One tidbit, Marlin, I've seen this before, like when I was some of my early years in Brazil, where the currency went on a period where it strengthened and prices got so bad that farmers protested. And I actually got invited to a farmer protest where they were blockading some of the federal highways. and I declined to participate. Maybe I should have, but I felt a little uncomfortable, uh, as a foreigner at that time on a travel visa, protesting the Brazil's federal government's fiscal policies, and so I stayed out of it. But I remember this has happened before, and it was a big deal, and farmers got riled up about it. I don't know that there's a whole lot they can do, but um, and it's not quite at that stage, but it's starting to raise some eyebrows. Put it that way.
As you look at where we are in the markets, you said the markets don't seem to be reacting to any kind of weather premium right now. I don't see any progress on the tariff front either. Do you? I mean, there's a lot of rumors that stuff is taking place, but I haven't seen any real signed agreements or anything. Have you?
Nothing, and that's another thing that we're all kind of waiting on the edge of our seat to hear what these tariff agreements. And they said that they had thought they were making good progress, getting close on maybe 14 countries, but which countries are they, right? If it's Ethiopia and Liechtenstein, it's not gonna matter a whole lot, right? The big fish we need something to get done with China, and that's probably not going to happen in a timely fashion. That's a lot bigger fish. And I was talking to Justin earlier, and he thought, well, if they got a deal done with India, that might help some of our ethanol exports quite a bit. But I don't know. I was hoping we get something done quicker, but it doesn't look like it. And again, if we tariffed everybody. So if we get some trade deal done with a country that we have a trade surplus with, I don't know what benefit there is to be. And we don't, it's never been made transparent what our actual goal is with each country. It's kind of, we're going to tariff everyone and then, kind of bring them to the negotiating table and see what we can get out of them to improve purchases from the U.S. So,
and yet you have to be impressed, and I'm just daily amazed by the cattle market that it can continue to crank out. It can continue to crank out new record highs almost every single day, and the economy just seems like it's just kind of on a razor's edge right now, and yet it just continues to go skyward.
We probably sound like a broken record, I get to these levels and I think about hedging, but the problem is that you cry wolf enough and then people say, well, if I wait a little bit longer, I'll lock in a better price. But sooner or later it just seems like we're due for a much bigger correction. But so far they've just been buying opportunities, and we keep chugging higher. And I think some of these 10% tariffs, we could probably absorb fairly well in some of these countries, but like with China, where we 145% tariffs, I mean, that's going to effectively bring trade to an end, at least with that country. And I know there's some other countries that have some larger ones too. Vietnam has 46% tariffs, and I think Indonesia has 32% tariffs. And so those are a lot more challenging to just simply pass on the cost to consumers in the form of a tax. And so, but I don't know, a lot of those 10% ones, they can be more easily absorbed, and so far consumers are taking it.
And something a little bit out of left field, just wanted to let everybody know that we hear you. I am getting feedback about the governors of Kansas and Nebraska have declared states of emergency in both states because of an energy shortage. I hadn't seen that one coming, but many of the petroleum terminals where they get their fuel from, they can't get it trucked out fast enough. It sounds like there are a lot of problems with the implications of all these satellite tracking devices on trucks, where you can only drive so many hours and you have to shut down, and there aren't enough truckers to go around right now. And I understand there's long lines at some of these fuel depots, and it sounds like several terminals in Kansas and Oklahoma are affected there. So I'm going to keep an eye on that story for everybody. I've been getting quite a bit of feedback from different people about that. Hopefully they can get that rectified, but they have applied for some emergency action. So we'll hopefully see they can keep their fuel supply as going, especially getting toward irrigation time. Matthew, thanks for the comments today. Always good to talk with you. I appreciate it. And we'll talk again next week. Matthew Kruse, president of Comstock Investments. That'll do it for this episode. Thanks again for tuning in. For producer Brianne Jenkins, I'm Marlin Bohling, and we'll catch you next time here on the Comstock channel. Futures trading involves risk. The risk of loss in trading futures and or options is substantial, and each investor and or trader must consider whether this is a suitable investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results.